The Los Angeles Chargers last season, I'm not going to lie, they let me down. Before the season started in 2021, I had the Chargers as a playoff lock, almost a dark horse Super Bowl contender. And yet they went 9-8 and they finished in third place in the AFC West division. Now, the reason why their season went the way that it did last year was, one, because they dealt with a good amount of injuries on the defensive side of the football, and two, they played down the competition. A good example of that was the loss against the Houston Texans. So this year, this is a better football team than what they were going into last season. The offensive line is going to be really good. Minus right tackle, this is a phenomenal offensive line that the Chargers are going to have. On defense, you trade for Khalil Mack. You're going to be pairing him up with Joey Bosa. That's going to end up being one of the best pass rushing duos in the NFL. You have Asante Samuel Jr. going into year 2, coming off a really good rookie season. You're going to be pairing him up with J.C. Jackson, who was locked down for New England last season. So this defense is going to be phenomenal. At least it should be when you look at it on paper. You have Derwin James, who is one of the best football players in the NFL, not one of the best defensive players in the NFL, one of the best football players in the NFL. There isn't a player in the NFL that can do so much and mean so much to his team as Derwin James. So I think when you look at the Chargers, their best case scenario for me is 13-4. I was really close to saying 14-3, but the reason why I have them at 13-4 is simply for the fact that I think that linebacker could cost them. Now, I don't know what it is with Brandon Staley. Maybe he just doesn't care about the linebacker position. Maybe it isn't really a big piece of his defense, because when he was the defensive coordinator for the Rams, the linebacker play there wasn't really all that great. So hopefully, maybe Kenneth Murray ends up developing and having a strong season, and he ends up living up to his first round draft status. So if he ends up playing up to that, this defense definitely could end up being times 4 as good as what it looks on paper, because you already have a really good defensive line. You already have a pretty good secondary. Your only weakness is the linebacker position. So if Kenneth Murray can give you at least decent, maybe above average play, that could make this defense maybe end up being a top 5 unit. So the offense, you have a great offensive line, left tackle, left guard, center, right guard, all that is really great. Your only weakness is right tackle. So if you can get some okay right tackle play, that's going to be a bonus. And we already know just how talented this wide receiver group is. You got Keenan Allen. Really don't understand why people don't think he's a top 10 wide receiver in the league, but I've already ranted about that enough. You have Mike Williams coming off a breakout season. He has a fresh new contract extension. Then you have Austin Eckler, who is one of the best scat backs in the league. And then we already know about the young gun that is Justin Herbert. So, I mean, this offense is absolutely loaded. This team is absolutely loaded. This is one of the most talented teams in the NFL, not just in the AFC, but in the NFL. If you were to rank every team's roster based off talent, I think that the Chargers will probably be in the top 7, maybe top 6 of that. So this team has all of the pieces to not only have the potential of being able to get the number 1 overall seed in the AFC when it comes to the playoff race, but maybe they could end up making a deep run in the playoff and maybe end up becoming a Super Bowl contender. And I saw an article on Bleacher Report that said what teams are playoff teams but not Super Bowl contenders, and the Chargers were listed in that article. And I was really a little bit taken back by that, because outside the linebacker and right tackle, this team doesn't really have any big weaknesses. So if this team can get, at least decent play from the right tackle and linebacker spots, this is a team that's going to end up being one of the best in the NFL this season. Now, my worst case scenario for the Chargers is 8-9. And I really can't see them winning no less than 8 games. If they lose more than 9 games, I think Brandon Staley, without a doubt, is going to be the first thing cooking, and they're going to be bringing in somebody else. Maybe it could be Sean Payton, but with the talent that the Chargers have, I really can't see them missing the playoffs. If they can't even win 9 games, then, I mean, what are we doing? You get what I'm saying? It's really hard to disappoint and not make it into the postseason when you have a team that has so much talent. And even though the NFL isn't all about talent, you also have to have a really good coach. We've seen several examples of that throughout over the last couple of years. A good one would be Jason Garrett with the Dallas Cowboys. He has so much talent, but yet they always underachieve. So with Brandon Staley last season, this was somebody who took a lot of risk, This was somebody who was super aggressive when it came to attempting to move the chains and fourth down situations, and I love it. But at the same time, it also costed the LA Chargers some games as well, which is another reason why they also played down the competition. So for the LA Chargers, you have to wonder, is the risk-taking going to be a factor this season? Is right tackle going to end up holding the Chargers back? What about linebacker? Linebacker is going to be really big for the Chargers this season because it's not all that great from a talent standpoint. I mean, you do have Kenneth Murray, and remind you that he was a first-round pick, and you can make all the excuses in the world for him saying that he was injured and whatnot. Listen, every single NFL player by the time we get to week 7 or week 8 of the season is injured. I don't think there's no NFL player that goes through a whole entire season playing at 100%. It just doesn't really happen. So for Kenneth Murray, you know, if he ends up not really being all that great and the linebacker play really isn't all that great, then I think that, you know, maybe that could be a factor into the Chargers only having 8 wins. But it's really hard for me to see the Chargers having this season where they don't get into the postseason. That's why my record prediction for them is 10-7. The reason why I have them at 10 wins and maybe not a little bit higher simply for the fact that this division is tough, and I do think that they're going to split with everybody. I don't really think there's going to be a team that they're going to just mop the floor with, but I think that they could be a team that gets into the wild card and then they end up having a couple of upsets, and then boom, you see them in the AFC Championship game. So I think that Brandon Staley, I do have a lot of confidence in him as the head coach. I like how he approaches the game. He's somebody who isn't afraid to take risk. And oftentimes when you're trying to win, or not just trying to win in the NFL, but when you're trying to be successful, you have to take risk. And the people who are the most successful in life, they took risks, they gambled. And for Brandon Staley, I like the fact that he's willing to gamble. Even if it may cost him some games, he never holds back on decision. I love that. I love coaches that are in 4th and 2, 4th and 3, and they don't kick field goals. They try to get the first down and keep the drive alive. So for Brandon Staley, I think that's the reason why I have so much confidence in him. I just love the fact that he's aggressive. Sometimes you roll the dice and you don't get the number that you want. And sometimes you roll the dice and it plays out in your favor. So I think more times than not this season, his gambles are going to play off. I think that this defense is going to be probably the most improved unit in the NFL, and offensively they should pick off where they left off last season and be even better. So I have them at 10-7. You look at their schedule. Now this division is already pretty tough, but their schedule, honestly, outside of the AFC West, isn't all that difficult. I mean, you get to play Jacksonville, Houston. You got to play the Cleveland Browns. You don't know what's going to happen if Deshaun Watson is going to be available for that game or not. Seattle, Atlanta, back-to-back. And you play Atlanta coming off a bye. So you just look at the Chargers. Their schedule isn't all that tough until the later portion of the season where you have to play Kansas City, Arizona, Las Vegas. I remind you that they're playing both those Las Vegas and Arizona games on the road in back-to-back weeks. Then you have to play Miami, Tennessee, Indianapolis, the Rams, and Denver to close out the year, and that's where things can get really challenging. But overall, I think that they should be able to win 10 games. That's going to be my record prediction for the Los Angeles Chargers. So this is it for my AFC West 2022 record predictions. I appreciate you guys for listening to this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. Drop your record predictions for each team in this division down in the comment section down below. Also, make sure that you check out the JT Sports Podcast, available on all podcasting platforms. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed. And I will see you guys with another episode of the JT Sports Podcast.